On a cold night in November 1981, something happened off the coast of California that would become one of Hollywood's longest-running mysteries. The setting was a yacht called Splendor. The people on board were famous. One of them was actress Natalie Wood, one of the biggest movie stars of her time. Another was her husband, actor Robert Wagner. Also there was actor Christopher Walken, who was working with Natalie on a film at the time. It was supposed to be a quiet Thanksgiving weekend getaway. Instead, it turned into a tragedy that people are still talking about more than 40 years later. Sometime during the night, Natalie Wood disappeared from the yacht. Hours later, she was gone. The next morning, her body was found floating in the dark waters near Catalina Island. She was only 43 years old. At first, the story seemed simple. Authorities ruled her death an accidental drowning. But almost immediately, questions began to grow. People wondered what really happened on that yacht. Why had Natalie gone out into the water late at night? Why were there reports of arguments earlier in the evening? Over the years, the story never went away. Investigators reopened the case decades later. Witnesses spoke again. Rumors and theories continued to spread across Hollywood and far beyond it. But for the people closest to Natalie, the story was never just a mystery. It was a loss that never fully healed. Among those people was her daughter, Natasha Gregson Wagner. When Natalie died, Natasha was just a little girl. For many years, she stayed mostly quiet about what happened. She grew up hearing the stories, the speculation, and the endless questions about her mother's final night. But as the decades passed, Natasha began to speak more openly, not just about the mystery, but about the woman behind the headlines. About what her mother was really like when the cameras were gone. About the fears Natalie carried her entire life. And about the painful truth of growing up without her. To understand Natalie Wood's story, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. Long before the yachts, the rumors, and the tragedy. Back to a little girl whose life in Hollywood started almost before she could walk. Natalie Wood wasn't born with that name. She entered the world on July 20th, 1938, in San Francisco, California. Her birth name was Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko. Her parents were immigrants from Russia. Like many immigrant families who came to America during that time, they were chasing a better life. But Natalie's mother had something else in mind. Her name was Maria, and she believed something very strongly. She believed her daughter was meant to be a star. According to family stories, Maria once visited a fortune teller while Natalie was still very young. The fortune teller supposedly told her that Natalie would become famous, but also warned that water would play a dangerous role in her life. That story would later take on an eerie meaning. But at the time, Maria focused only on the first part, fame. From the time Natalie was a toddler, her mother began pushing her toward acting. She took the little girl to auditions, film studios, and meetings with producers. Natalie was barely old enough to understand what was happening, but the cameras loved her. She had large, expressive eyes and a natural way of performing that made directors take notice immediately. By the time she was 4 years old, she was already appearing in small film roles. Her childhood quickly became very different from most other kids. While other children were going to school, playing outside, and making friends in their neighborhoods, Natalie was spending her days on film sets. The lights were bright. The cameras were everywhere. Adults surrounded her constantly, telling her where to stand, how to speak, and how to smile. Her mother stayed close by at all times. Some people who knew the family later described Maria as fiercely protective. Others described her as controlling. Natalie herself would later talk about how strict her mother could be. There were stories from film sets where Maria demanded that Natalie behave perfectly, never complain, and always follow instructions from directors. Even as a child, Natalie understood something important. Her job was to perform. Her big breakthrough came in 1947 when she was cast in the classic Christmas film Miracle on 34th Street. In the movie, she played a little girl who slowly begins to believe in Santa Claus. The role made her instantly recognizable. Audiences loved her. Suddenly, Natalie Wood was no longer just another child actor. She was becoming one of Hollywood's most promising young stars. But behind the scenes, the pressure was growing. Hollywood in the 1940s was a tough place for adults. For children, it could be even harder. Natalie spent long hours filming scenes, memorizing lines, and working under strict studio schedules. Education often came from tutors on set instead of regular schools. She didn't have the kind of carefree childhood most people remember. Instead, she was learning how the entertainment industry worked before she was even 10 years old. And as the years went by, the expectations placed on her only became heavier. Because once Hollywood sees a star in a child, it rarely lets the child grow up normally. As Natalie Wood moved into her teenage years, things began to change. Being a child star is one thing. Growing into an adult actor in Hollywood is something very different. Many child actors lose their careers when they grow older. Studios stop calling. Audiences lose interest. The roles disappear. Natalie and her family knew that risk very well. The pressure to successfully transition into adult roles was enormous. During the 1950s, the Hollywood studio system still controlled almost everything about an actor's life. Studios often decided how stars should dress, how they should behave in public, and even who they should date. Natalie was no exception. She was now a teenager living in a world where millions of people recognized her face. Fans followed her career closely. Magazines wrote about her constantly. Photographers waited for pictures everywhere she went. At the same time, Natalie was trying to figure out who she was as a person. Friends later said she often felt lonely during those years. Even though she was surrounded by people in the film industry, real friendships could be difficult. Many relationships in Hollywood were tied to careers and publicity. But Natalie kept working. In 1955, she landed a role that would change everything. She starred in the film Rebel Without a Cause, alongside rising actor James Dean. The movie told the story of troubled teenagers struggling to find their place in the world. Natalie's performance was emotional and powerful. Audiences connected deeply with the character she played. The film became a cultural landmark. And for Natalie, it proved something important. She wasn't just a former child star. She was now a serious actress. The success of the film brought new opportunities. But it also brought even more pressure. Natalie began to struggle privately with anxiety and self-doubt. People who knew her during this period often said she worried constantly about her career. She feared making mistakes. She worried that audiences might stop loving her. She also began experiencing emotional stress that sometimes led to periods of deep sadness. Hollywood continued moving fast around her. More films, more interviews, more expectations. The public saw a glamorous young star. But behind that image was a young woman still trying to find stability in a world that rarely slowed down. And soon, another part of her life would begin making headlines. Her love life. Because before long, Natalie would meet a man who would become one of the most important and complicated figures in her entire story. His name was Robert Wagner, and their relationship would shape the rest of Natalie Wood's life in ways no one could have predicted. By the mid-1950s, Natalie would have become one of the most recognizable young actresses in Hollywood. Studios trusted her. Directors liked working with her. And audiences were beginning to see her not just as a former child star, but as a serious performer. Around that time, she met a young actor named Robert Wagner. Wagner was handsome, confident, and quickly building his own career in Hollywood. He had the kind of charm that fit perfectly into the movie industry at the time. The two met in the mid-1950s, and their relationship quickly became the kind of story Hollywood loved to promote. Young stars. Attractive. Famous. Magazines couldn't get enough of them. Photographs of Natalie and Robert appeared everywhere. They attended parties together, walked red carpets together, and quickly became one of the most talked about couples in the industry. In 1957, when Natalie was just 19 years old, they got married. Hollywood presented the wedding like a fairy tale. For fans watching from the outside, it seemed like the perfect love story. Two young stars at the height of their popularity starting a glamorous life together. But the reality was more complicated. Natalie was still very young. She had grown up in front of cameras and had very little experience living a normal adult life. Robert's career was also growing quickly, and the demands of two busy acting careers created tension. Long filming schedules kept them apart for long periods. Public attention followed them everywhere. Every small problem in their relationship could quickly become gossip in the entertainment press. Friends later said the couple argued often. There were rumors of jealousy, misunderstandings, and the constant pressure of living under public scrutiny. By the early 1960s, the marriage began to fall apart. In 1962, Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner divorced. For fans, the breakup came as a shock. The golden couple of Hollywood had separated. For Natalie, it was deeply painful. She had believed in the relationship. She had believed in the future they were supposed to build together. Instead, she found herself starting over again. And as her personal life grew more complicated, her professional career was reaching an entirely new level. While her marriage was struggling, Natalie Wood was becoming one of the biggest movie stars in the world. During the late 1950s and early 1960s, she delivered some of the most memorable performances of her career. One of those came in Splendor in the Grass in 1961. The film was emotional, intense, and very different from many roles she had played before. Natalie's performance earned her an Academy Award nomination. That same year, another film changed her career forever. West Side Story. The movie was a musical adaptation of the famous stage production, and it quickly became one of the most successful films of the decade. Natalie played Maria, a young woman caught in a tragic love story between two rival street gangs. The film was a huge success with audiences and critics. The music, the choreography, and the emotional performances turned West Side Story into a cultural phenomenon. Suddenly, Natalie Wood was no longer just a major actress. She was a Hollywood icon. But success didn't erase the private struggles she carried. Friends often described Natalie as sensitive and sometimes deeply insecure. Despite all the praise she received, she often doubted herself. She worried about her performances. She worried about whether audiences would continue to support her. Working in Hollywood could be exhausting. Long hours on set, constant travel, endless interviews, and always the feeling that one bad performance could damage everything she had built. Natalie continued to work with major actors during this period, including people like Warren Beatty. Her career remained strong throughout the 1960s. But the spotlight that made her famous also meant that her personal life was never truly private. Relationships became headlines. Breakups became stories for gossip columns. And while Natalie was admired by millions of fans, the pressures of fame were never far away. Still, one person from her past would soon return to her life in a surprising way. Robert Wagner. The man she had once married. The man she had once divorced. Years after their separation, their story wasn't finished. After their divorce in 1962, Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner went their separate ways. Both continued their careers in Hollywood. Both dated other people. And for a while, it seemed like their relationship had simply become part of the past. But something unexpected happened during the late 1960s. They began seeing each other again. First, it was casual conversations, occasional meetings, friendly reconnecting after years apart. But gradually, the connection returned. By the early 1970s, the two decided to try again. In 1972, Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner remarried. For many people in Hollywood, it felt like an unlikely reunion. Divorced couples rarely remarried each other, especially after years apart. But Natalie believed they had both changed. They were older now, more experienced, less focused on the glamorous party life that often surrounded movie stars. Natalie had also started thinking differently about her future. For most of her life, her schedule had been dominated by work, film sets, studio meetings, public appearances. Now she wanted something else. Family. In 1970, Natalie had already welcomed her daughter, Natasha Gregson Wagner. Becoming a mother changed her priorities. Friends said Natalie loved spending time at home with her child, away from cameras and reporters. When she remarried Robert Wagner, the two tried to build a more stable family life. They spent more time at their home. Natalie began accepting fewer acting roles. Hollywood was still part of her life, but it was no longer the only thing that mattered. From the outside, things appeared calm. But Natalie still carried certain fears and anxieties that had followed her since childhood. And one of those fears was something very specific: water. For most of her life, Natalie would had a deep fear of water. Friends and family knew about it. Some said the fear started when she was young, after an accident during a film shoot where she nearly fell into the water. Others connected it to the story her mother used to tell about the fortune teller who predicted water would play a dangerous role in Natalie's life. Whatever the reason, the fear stayed with her. Natalie rarely liked being near deep water. She was uncomfortable on boats. Swimming wasn't something she enjoyed. Even during vacations, people close to her noticed she was cautious around the ocean. But like many fears, it wasn't something she talked about publicly. Hollywood expected confidence from its stars. Vulnerability was rarely part of the image studios wanted to present. So Natalie continued living her life. She focused on raising her children and maintaining her career. Her relationship with Robert Wagner seemed more stable during their second marriage. But like many relationships, it had its difficult moments. Life in Hollywood could be unpredictable. Careers changed quickly. Projects came and went. Public attention never fully disappeared. By the early 1980s, Natalie Wood was still respected in the industry and occasionally taking new acting roles. One of those projects brought her together with actor Christopher Walken. They were working on a science fiction film called Brainstorm. During Thanksgiving weekend in 1981, Natalie decided to take a short trip aboard the family yacht Splendor. On board were Robert Wagner, Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain. It was meant to be a quiet getaway, just a few days away from work, a chance to relax on the ocean. But before that weekend ended, something would happen that would change Natalie Wood's story forever. Because that trip would become the final chapter of her life, and the beginning of a mystery that people would debate for decades. By November 1981, Natalie Wood was 43 years old. She had spent nearly her entire life in Hollywood. She was no longer the young actress rushing from movie set to movie set. Her priorities had shifted. Family meant more to her now. She was raising her children and taking acting roles only when something truly interested her. One of those roles was in the science fiction film Brainstorm. The movie starred Natalie alongside Christopher Walken. Filming had been intense. Like many productions, it required long hours and a lot of focus. When Thanksgiving weekend approached in 1981, a short break seemed like a good idea. Natalie, her husband Robert Wagner, and Christopher Walken decided to spend the weekend aboard Wagner's yacht, the Splendor. The yacht was docked near Catalina Island, just off the coast of Southern California. It was meant to be a relaxing trip, just a few days away from work, away from the noise of Hollywood. Also aboard the yacht was the captain, Dennis Davern. At first, the weekend seemed calm. They spent time talking, eating, and enjoying the quiet of the ocean. But according to later accounts, things became tense during the evening of November 28th. There were reports that Natalie and Robert had been arguing. Some witnesses later said the argument involved Christopher Walken. Others suggested it may have been about Natalie wanting to return to acting more seriously. No one on the boat ever told exactly the same version of the story. What is known is that the group spent time at a nearby restaurant on Catalina Island earlier that evening. They returned to the yacht later in the night. At some point after midnight, something changed. Natalie Wood was no longer on the yacht. Exactly how she left the boat has never been fully explained. Sometime during the early morning hours of November 29th, Robert Wagner realized she was missing. The small inflatable dinghy that was attached to the yacht was also gone. Search teams were called. The dark ocean around Catalina Island became the focus of a growing emergency search. But by the time the sun rose, the search had already turned into something else. Because Natalie Wood had been found. Early in the morning on November 29th, 1981, a body was discovered floating in the water near Catalina Island. It was Natalie Wood. She was wearing a nightgown, socks, and a heavy jacket. The inflatable dinghy from the yacht was found nearby. News spread quickly. Hollywood was stunned. One of the most famous actresses in the world had died under strange and heartbreaking circumstances. At first, investigators tried to piece together the basic timeline of what had happened. The official conclusion at the time was that Natalie had drowned accidentally. Authorities suggested she may have tried to leave the yacht in the dinghy during the night and slipped into the water. But almost immediately, questions started appearing. Friends and people who knew Natalie pointed out something important. She had always been afraid of water. The idea that she would willingly climb into a small boat late at night didn't make sense to some people who knew her well. Over the years, more details from that night slowly surfaced. The captain of the yacht, Dennis Davern, later spoke publicly about arguments that had taken place earlier in the evening. Witnesses described hearing raised voices. Some reports suggested that Natalie and Robert Wagner had been fighting before she disappeared. For decades, the case remained officially closed as an accident. But the public never completely accepted the explanation. Rumors continued to spread. People debated what really happened that night. Then, in 2011, 30 years after Natalie's death, the case was reopened by investigators. The circumstances surrounding the drowning were re-examined. New witness statements were taken. The official cause of death was eventually changed to drowning and other undetermined factors. In 2018, authorities publicly named Robert Wagner as a person of interest in the investigation. He has always denied any wrongdoing. The mystery surrounding Natalie Wood's final night has never been fully resolved. And while investigators continued searching for answers, another story was unfolding quietly. The story of the little girl who lost her mother that night. When Natalie Wood died in 1981, her daughter Natasha Gregson Wagner was only 11 years old. At that age, understanding something as complicated as a sudden death is nearly impossible. Natasha suddenly found herself growing up in the shadow of one of Hollywood's most talked about tragedies. For years, her mother's name appeared constantly in newspapers, documentaries, and television programs discussing the mystery. But Natasha's memories were different. To her, Natalie Wood wasn't just a famous actress. She was simply Mom. Natasha later described her mother as warm, affectionate, and deeply loving. She remembered Natalie laughing, telling stories, and spending quiet moments at home. The woman the public saw on movie screens was only one part of who Natalie really was. Growing up, Natasha had to deal with the strange experience of hearing strangers debate what happened to her mother. Every few years, the case would return to the headlines. New theories, new interviews, new speculation. For Natasha, it meant reliving the loss again and again. Still, she tried to build her own life. She eventually followed her mother into acting, appearing in films and television shows. But as the years passed, something else began to grow inside her. A desire to understand her mother's story more clearly. Not just the final night, but the entire life that came before it. For many years, Natasha Gregson Wagner avoided speaking publicly about the mystery surrounding her mother. It was painful, it was complicated, and much of the story had been shaped by speculation rather than personal memories. But as time passed, Natasha slowly began sharing more about who her mother really was. Not the Hollywood legend, the person. She spoke about Natalie Wood as a devoted mother who loved spending time with her children. Someone who enjoyed quiet evenings at home more than glamorous Hollywood parties. Natasha described Natalie as sensitive, emotional, and deeply caring toward the people she loved. She also acknowledged the struggles her mother faced. Growing up in Hollywood had never been easy. Natalie had lived under constant pressure from the time she was a child. By speaking openly, Natasha wanted people to remember something important. Her mother's life was much bigger than the mystery surrounding her death. There were decades of work, friendships, family moments, and personal struggles that shaped who Natalie Wood was. Even after more than 40 years, the questions about that final night on the yacht remain. But for Natasha, the focus has never been only about the unanswered mystery. It has been about remembering her mother as a real person. A woman who spent her life in front of cameras. A woman who carried private fears and hopes like anyone else. And a woman whose story continues to fascinate the world decades after her passing.